Today we are going to be talking about modals. Modals can be found in your book in chapter 4. Now we have 4 different types of modals. We have modals of advice, modals of necessity, modals of prohibition and lack of necessity, and modals of obligation. And for each of the modals that we use, there will be a formula. Now, modals of advice are words that we use when we want to give advice to someone. And we have present and future forms, which give advice and opinions about a current situation. And then we have past or perfect that express opinions about missed opportunities or regrets about a past situation, which means something was a good idea, but it didn't happen. So first, when we talk about modals, I'm going to show you a chart that shows that some of the modals have a weaker meaning, a strong meaning, and a stronger meaning. So here are my modals in blue here. So I have the modal could, might, should or should not, and ought to. These are 4 modals that have a weaker meaning. My strong modals are had better or had better not, or had better have or had not better have in the negative context. Stronger modals are have to, have got to, and must. So for modals of advice, we have could, might, should, ought to, had better have to, have got to, and must. Now you might ask me, when do we use the weaker and the strong and the stronger modals? So we use these weaker modals with words like maybe or perhaps and I think. And these weaker modals are used when we want to sound more polite when we are talking to people. We often use weaker modals also when we are talking to someone that we don't know or people that we don't know very well. Strong modals are used to give advice with a warning of possible bad consequences if the advice is not followed. This means that I might use these modals if I want to give you a sense that there will be a bad consequence if you don't follow my advice. Stronger modals is something that the speaker uses when they think something is necessary or required, like a rule or a law. So here's a different way to look at it. Modals of advice, here are our weaker modals, could and might. Weak, should or ought to. Strong is had better. And stronger is have got to and must. Now I've separated the 4 modals from this into weaker and weak. And then you'll notice that I have also put have to here in the middle between strong and stronger. So this shows when we use the modals and with whom we use the modals with. Now here's a formula on how to make a sentence using the modals in a present-future context. So our formula is we will have a subject plus your modal, these words here, plus the base form of the verb, which will be your choice, plus an activity. That's also something that you decide. Now for today, we're going to choose pronouns as the subject. So here's an example of modals of advice in the present future form. Let's say that I come to you and I say, I don't like my job. I want to quit my job. Now, if you don't know me very well or you want to be very polite, you might say to me, you could talk to your boss, maybe she can help. Or you also might give me the advice, you might talk to your boss, maybe she can help. Now, if you know me a little bit better, you could use these modals and say, you should not quit until you find another job. Or, you ought to keep your job until you find another job. Now, let's say that you are a friend of mine and we have known each other for a couple of years. You might say to me, you had better keep your job, you need the money. Or, you have to keep your job, you need the money. Now, let's say that I go to my mother and father and I say, I don't like my job, I want to quit. Well, since they are my parents, they will probably use a stronger modal with me. And they might say, you have got to keep your job. You must keep your job. So someone that knows me very well, like my family, might use the strongest modal when we're talking about advice. Now let's look at the formula for using modals of advice in the past. So our formula is you will have a subject. Here are your modals, plus the verb have, plus the past tense form of the base verb, plus an activity. So here are some examples of modals of advice in the past or past perfect. Now, this sentence here is going to communicate that something in the past. So if I come to you and say, I did not like my job, so I quit. So I have already quit my job. This happened in the past. So you are going to give me pieces of advice that show that I should not have done this in the past. So here's an example of maybe using a weaker modal if you don't know the person very well. And the response would be, you could have talked to your boss instead of quitting your job. An example of a weak modal, you should have waited until you found another job. Okay? Or you ought not to have quit your job until you had found another one. And what if I'm friends with the person? My friend might say, you had better have found another job first. You needed the money. Okay? Once again, you had better have found another job first. So they're saying to me that they hope that I found another job before I quit the one that I had in the past. And this is something that my parents might say to me. This one right here. And just to let you know, in the past or past perfect, we don't use must or have got to in the past form. So this would be the strongest modal for modals of advice using a past form. And that's the end of this video.